Okay, everyone. Today's class is going to be on quadratic equation. Yeah, I'm all sweaty because I've been doing a lot of things trying to put up this lesson together. All right, so let's start. Would like to know what a quadratic equation is before we proceed. I think we should even get to know what an equation is before we talk about quadratic equation. Yeah. Now, what's an equation? An equation is just a mathematical statement that tells that two things are equal. For instance, if I say x equals b, this is automatically an equation. It means that b will inherit the value of x will inherit the value of x. So if x was to be equal to 1, b will also be equal to 1. Right? Yeah. So that's one way of looking at an equation simply. So sometimes equation can they range from very simple things like x equals to b to maybe x plus 5 equals to 7 to maybe x plus 5 equals to 2x minus 3, right? All these are equations. Now one thing you always see in an equation is that there must be an equality sign. All right, so that tells that a particular mathematical expression is an equation. All right, good. So if you've gotten that, now let's look at what we call linear equations. Some equations can be this simple. Like I said before, let's say 2x plus 5 equals 7. All right, 2x plus 5 equals 7 is an equation. All right, and it's a simple equation, and this type of equation is called linear equation. Why is it called linear equation? It is called linear equation because the power of x here is 1. All right, so when you write x like this, it's the same thing as writing x raised to the power of 1. So because this one does not really affect it, so we don't write it, so we just write x instead of x to the power of 1. But when it starts from 2, we need to write it so that we can really indicate. Okay, fine. Having said that, so we have 2x here plus 5 equals to 7. This type of equation is linear equation. This is not the same thing. Okay, let's also look at an equation like x plus 5 equals 7. Alright, this is still still a linear equation. The thing is that the difference here is that the coefficient of x here is 2 and the coefficient of x here is 1. Alright, if you don't know what coefficient is, a coefficient is a multiplier of an unknown. Okay, whatever values multiply an unknown is what a coefficient. So 2p, the coefficient of p is 2. Alright, having said that, let's proceed. So this type of equation is what? A linear equation. A linear equation. Alright, so there are other types of equation, and that's where quadratic equation comes in. Now this type of equation is different from an equation like this. X squared plus 5 equals 9. These are two different types of equation. Alright, yeah, so these are two different types of equation. This is a linear equation, and this is what? A quadratic equation. Now what's the difference between these two equations? X plus 5 equals 7 and x squared plus 5 equals 9. What's the difference between these two equations? You might want to say 9 and 7. Yes, you are correct, but that's not very typical. I could still write 7 here. Okay, let's say I'm writing 7 here. So what's the difference between these two equations? Yes, the first thing your mind will run to is the power here. So the power of x here is 1, like I said earlier, and the power of x here is 2. Right, so whenever an equation comes with the power of the unknown as 2, then such equation is automatically what? A quadratic equation. So this is x squared plus 5 equals 7. So this is a quadratic equation, this is not a quadratic equation. Why we can actually solve this equation? The first one here, we have x plus 5 equals 7, right? We can simply solve this by saying x plus 5 minus 5. That's by subtracting 5 from both sides. And 7 minus 5. Plus 5 minus 5 will be what? 0. So you have 7 minus 5, which is what? 2. You get this? Right. So we have simply solved this equation. We cannot do the same thing for this particular equation, right? Even though one might be tempted to do that. Now, to further explain what I want to say, I'm going to use another example of a quadratic equation, and I will show you something so that we know that quadratic equation is solved differently. Alright, so I want to show you. So let's say we have x squared plus 5 equals 9. This is the example I used before. Alright, now we are going to look at this question and solve it. So this is going to be x squared equals let me do this, plus 5 minus 5 equals 9 minus 5. I can still do this, right? So plus 5 minus 5 is what? 0. So we have x squared equals 9 minus 5 is actually 4, right? So we can take the square root of, we can take the square root of both sides, so that we have x equals to root of what? 4. And when we do that, we are going to have x equals root of 4 is what? Plus minus what? Square root of 4 is 2, right? X can have two different values. So this can be x equals plus 2 or minus 2, right? Okay, fine. So having said that, why is it plus 2 or minus 2? Let's substitute this. Let's test if this equation is correct. Okay, I'm testing it here. So I have plus 2 or minus 2. So, and I'm testing it in this equation. So x squared plus 5 equals 9. So I want to check if it's correct. I put plus 2 here. So I have plus 2 squared plus 5, which will be plus 2 squared is what? 4 plus 5, and I get what? 9. So this plus 2 is correct, right? So let's also check for minus 2. Minus 2 squared plus 5. Minus 2 squared is the same thing as minus 2 times minus 2. Minus times minus is plus. 2 times 2 is 4. So I have 4 plus 5. And that gives me what? 9. So that means that in this quadratic equation, I have two values. So why in a linear equation, when you solve, you often always have one value as the answer? In a quadratic equation, you will always have two values as the answer. Actually, the aim of this lesson was not to actually tell you this. Yeah, I was supposed to define quadratic equation. Alright, so now I want to believe that you already know what the definition of a quadratic equation is, right? So we know that any equation where you have the power of the unknown equal to 0 is equals to 2 is a quadratic equation. For instance, p squared plus 5 equals 0 is a quadratic equation. P squared plus 2p plus 1 equals 0 is a quadratic equation. It must not be x, right? I can have m squared plus let me say 4m plus 3 equals 0. Don't worry, in the next one we are going to see varieties of quadratic equations and examples. So all these are quadratic equations. I can have x squared plus 2x equals 0. This is also a quadratic equation. So once one of the unknown has a power that is 2, then such is a quadratic equation. So once the power of the unknown is 2, is a quadratic equation. Thank you very much. We are going to continue from here in the next lesson.